Vast armies undead do tread through the night, and in hordes march towards hapless victims to frighten. They stumble in step with glass eyes on the prizes, bunched hither, hunched over in monstrous disguises, in sizes not lofty but numbering a throng, to unleash on their prey the dreaded.
Ding-dong!
Small faces with traces of mother's eyeliner peer up to the resident candy provider, and there to intone ancient threats learnt verbatim, they lisp,
"Trick or treat!"
'Tis their stark ultimatum. Thus, region by region, such legions take plunder. Does this spectacle cause you to wonder? Just how did our fair festive forebears conceive of this primeval practice called All Hallows Eve? The answer, if anyone cares to research, surprises. It rises from Old Mother Church. On the cusp of the customary All Saints' Day, the Christian kinsfolk made mocking display. These children of light, both to tease and deride, don darkness, dull down as the sinister side. In preposterous pageants and dress diabolic, they hand to the damned just one final frolic. You see, with the light of the dawn on the morrow, the sunrise will swallow such darkness and sorrow. The future is futile for forces of evil, and so they did scorn them in times medieval. But this is the nature of shadow and gloom. In the gleaming of glory there can be no room. What force is resourced by the echoing black? When the brightness ignites, can the shadow push back? These forces of darkness, if such can be called, are banished by brilliance, by blazing enthralled. So the Bible begins with this fore-resolved fight. For a moment the darkness, then let there be light. First grief in the gloom, then joy from the east. First valley of shadow, then mountaintop feast. First wait for Messiah, then long-promised dawn. First desolate Friday, and then Easter morn. The armies of darkness, while doing their worst, can never extinguish this dazzling sunburst. So ridicule rogues if you must play a role, but beware getting lost in that bottomless hole. The triumph is not with the forces of night. It dawned with the one who said, "I am the light." There it is, the albatross around our necks, the Halloween video that will never be bettered. That's no matter what we do. Oh, man. Yes, hello, everybody. Hello. If we haven't met before, I'm Glen.
And I'm Paul.
How are you pronouncing that? Paul. I don't know either. Hello, everybody. It is. It's 2 days before All Hallows Eve, so yes, perhaps everyone's getting excited for All Saints' Day.
Yeah,
I'm sure All Hallows Day. But every year we roll out this video, which we made back in, was it 2013 when it first came out? I think it might be the 5th.
Is it really that
year.
old?
Yeah,
Goodness me.
I know. Back in the day, we. I wrote that poem, and then, because basically 10 of those, the guys at 10 of those, Jonathan Carswell in particular, said, what kind of video resource could we make for Halloween? Which is kind of handing me a poison chalice. Because it's, Glenn, do you want to wade in on the whole Halloween and Christians thing?
Yep.
And, no, I don't really.
Fair.
But I think my philosophy was let's aim for non-Christians and let's try to reach those who aren't in the church, and kind of leapfrog over a whole lot of intramural dispute within Christians, because Christians take different views on Halloween. Have you noticed that, Paul?
Do they? Really?
Yeah.
No, surely not. Yeah, I mean it's a strange one, isn't it? It's very controversial.
Yeah.
In the UK at least.
Right.
In America, I don't know if people bat an eyelid, do they? It seems much more it's much more a part of the culture in America than it is here anyway.
I think it is shifting in the States, but yeah, traditionally it's kind of been, hey, you have a House of Horrors.
When you say shifting,
know.
that people are getting more up in arms about.
Yeah, people are. Yeah,
Christians
are less comfortable with Halloween,
yeah, sure.
and I think Halloween itself has changed. It's it's the second most lucrative festival. After Christmas, like for all the supermarkets, and
so it's a big money spinner more than anything.
It totally is, and like I was just in the park with Ruby the other day, and all these kids were just talking about Halloween's coming up, and it must have been at least like a month out from Halloween coming up, and they're talking about Halloween in a way that I never did.
I don't remember. Yeah, as a kid, Halloween obviously came round like every year, but
I assume so.
Yeah, it did happen.
Yeah,
and but we never. There was never a kind of big thing of like, oh, we got to go and do Halloween. Let's dress up. Let's decorate. And that wasn't just because we're in. I don't just mean in a Christian household, but like even my friends who weren't Christians, they weren't really going around doing that. You know?
And people sort of complain, trick-or-treating, it's so American, it's not, And it is the whole thing, you teach your kids don't take candy from strangers the whole rest of the year, and then one day a year.
And then there'll always be someone posting the article as well, about the, like, razor blades in the chocolate, or, like the complete, when you go on Snopes and it's all hoaxes, but we've got to have a bit of scaremongering.
Yeah, where would we be without that? So, it tends to be that Christians kind of take these two views. Either retreat completely and batten down the hatches and pretend you're not in, which is what a lot of people do, Christian or not, when the trick-or-treaters knock. Or the other thing is just kind of surrender completely to it, which I was saying earlier. It was interesting watching Kate Botley, the Gogglebox vicar, as she was commenting on Halloween a couple of years ago. I remember watching her see something on TV and comment on it, and she said something that actually seems really sensible. She kind of said, why do we get up in arms when somebody dresses up like they're Hitler? Like when people at Halloween parties dress up like SS officers, we get up in arms, and yet every Halloween,
members of the royal family,
members of the royal family. Congratulations, Harry. By the way, you've come a long way from dressing up like a Nazi. But yeah, we have a problem with that. But then we have no problem with dressing up Jimmy like he's Satan.
Yeah,
who is orders of magnitude more evil than Hitler? Let it be said.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
I to be honest though, I'm sure like most people would just say, they'd just be like, well, loads of people go, Satan isn't real. That's what they'd say. They'd say that's the difference. Like
maybe
they'd say make believe. Probably.
Yeah.
That'd be their thing.
So, but then there's a problem on both sides of that, because you then say, do we just trivialize evil, sort of thing? Which, in a sense, is the original Christian.
Well, it's kind of what you get at in the video a little bit, isn't it?
Yeah.
There's a slight mocking of...
You mock the devil.
Yeah.
Yeah, Martin Luther said, if the devil will not yield to verses of Scripture, then you must mock him. That's because he cannot bear to be mocked. He's the proudest of all individuals, is the devil. And so the best way, after quoting Scripture verses, the best way to have a go at the devil is to mock him. And so that's why Christians would dress up their kids with pitchforks and tails. Because that's a ridiculous thing, and not because we think the devil.
I don't think a lot of Christians know that background to it either, do they? Because they seem just. I think people are just slightly in the dark about some of the origins of it and where it's come from.
And there are kind of history wars about it, like who do you trust on it? And one of the issues I saw in digging into the history of it a little bit is that the New Age want to claim Halloween for themselves, and they want to say it's this Samhain thing, Samhain, but in sort of Gaelic it's pronounced Samhain.
Oh,
it looks like it's pronounced Samhain. Samhain, yeah. I used to go to school with Samhain. Anyway, but it's pronounced Samhain. And so there are these claims.
Bad guy in Lord of the Rings, isn't he? Like
right.
Sauron.
Yes. That was Sarah when it's written down. So Samhain, it is claimed, was this really ancient pagan festival, and that's what Halloween really is. But all the sources for that sort of come in the 1970s from a whole bunch of like New Agers who want to claim the pagan roots of it. And I think far, far beyond far before any accounts that we have of Samhain, we have All Hallows Eve, which, like, literally from the 4th century, you have people celebrating All Hallows Eve. And they've shifted the date of when All Hallows Eve is in the calendar, so it wasn't always on the 31st of October. But even like, let's even imagine that the New Agers are right, that Samhain was the original thing. Is it the worst thing in the world to then plonk All Hallows Eve on top of it, and then to say, nah, All Hallows Day follows All Hallows Eve, and the light is stronger than the darkness? So, like, so even if there are the pagan roots to it, and I dispute that, I think it can be quite a good gospel redemption of the whole thing. Yeah. To say, yeah, we mock the devil on the evening, but then we celebrate the light, you know, when the day comes. Yeah. But that's the.
It doesn't seem like in a lot of the conversations I see about this. I mean, there doesn't seem to be that level of thought. It's just like, this is a cult and it's bad. Yeah. And there's nothing else to it. Yeah.
Which, you know, as a default instinct, okay, flee the devil. You know, and so, you know, if in doubt, don't dabble, and the darkness is real, and it's frightening, and it's scary, and it's powerful, and so, you know, we need to be aware of that, but we also need not to cower in the face of the darkness, and we need to be much more robust in saying, yeah, but the light's stronger, isn't it? And that's why I love, like, light parties. I think light parties these days are. Actually, they're pretty good approximations of what the ancient practice of All Hallows Day was all about. Yeah. It's basically about saying, yeah, the darkness is scary, but the light is stronger. And that'll preach. That'll. What's interesting to me is that on this subject, like, my 3-year-old is, because she hasn't seen Star Wars, my 3-year-old understands light and darkness better than most people. Right? Because she's pre-Star Wars, she would never assume that light and darkness are these equal opposite forces that are just going back and forth, and you need to find balance between light and darkness. Yeah. You know?
But I want to dispute that.
Yeah, of course you do.
See, surely bringing balance to the Force, I always thought it meant it was the darkness had unbalanced the Force. I never thought it was supposed to be a balance between good and evil, light and dark. I'd always assumed that it was supposed to be light and stuff. I mean, this is another topic, really, but
we might get it. We might get back to it.
That really, I think people misinterpret what bringing balance to the Force means. It wasn't like we've got to have light and dark, because you know, what did Obi-Wan say? You were supposed to destroy the Sith, not join it. You know? Right. Okay. So, you know, and he thought he was going to bring balance to the Force. So.
I'm out of my depth, people. I am way out of my depth here.
Yeah, don't speak about what you don't know, Glen, all right?
But George Lucas is Buddhist, right?
I don't know.
The light and the darkness.
Okay.
Yeah, so which again speaks to the whole, like, darkness is not the same thing as evil in the Buddhist frame. But yeah, okay, all right. But it is interesting. Whenever you talk about good and evil, people are always saying to me, if you have good, you've got to have evil. And then they literally follow it up by saying, because if you've got light, you've got to have dark. And you're like, hello, not really. Like, you switch the lights on. Yeah. You don't have to switch the darkness on next to it to have the darkness push back against the light. You know, it seems obvious to me. But I just think Halloween is a great opportunity for teaching those sort of truths, that actually there is a shadow, and the shadow is dark and scary. There's a valley of the shadow of death. But then, you know, the light triumphs, and let's use the opportunity to teach that.
Yeah, new day will come. It's the Samwise Gamgee, isn't it? And the light will shine out.
That's right, in the two towers. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think the Halloween thing. Someone had messaged the other day actually to Speak Life about Halloween and what to do about it, and they'd said they were thinking of. They were asking if there are any good tracts and things like that, and are they all naff and bits and bobs, and I said, well, I don't know all of them. Here's a few, but they were talking about possibly doing like a reverse trick or treat, right? Where they go round their neighbourhood giving stuff to people, not just like, here's a tract,
Haribo.
I don't know. Well, I don't know. Like they would give them something, right? But I just thought, well, that's quite a nice reversal of what's going on there, and it creates a conversation, doesn't it? Okay, and I think people are genuinely surprised when Christians do things like that. They're like, what are you doing?
I'll bet.
So
it's treat or trick. Yeah. Is it reverse trick or treat? No,
I suppose it's treat.
Treat
it's
or treat.
Really.
Just treat.
It's just treating people.
Yeah.
So I'd be interested to see if they do
going
that.
around just doing good to people.
I know,
that's crazy. It'll never catch on.
What do we think about? And I'm not giving it a lot of thought, but people talk about Halloween and they're saying, it's like the gateway, to the occult. Is it the gateway to the occult? Do we think people? Because my view of how a lot of people do Halloween is they just use it as even adults, they just do it as an excuse to have a party and wear some fancy dress.
Sure.
Now, of course, you're always going to find examples of, just like there's a lot of people celebrating Christmas, but it's not necessarily, doesn't mean...
It wasn't Jesus' birthday, for starters.
They're not necessarily...
Right, paid up Christians.
Doing Christian things because they're doing Christmas.
Yeah.
Just like a lot of people doing Halloween doesn't mean they're doing the work of Satan.
No, but it might, so people coming into a carol service, it might lower their threshold of antagonism to Christianity, and it might make them more... we hope it makes them more likely to adopt the Christian thing, and maybe the Halloween thing has that negative influence.
Maybe. I was thinking more of people at Christmas who don't... I'm not talking about going to church or anything. They're just doing Christmas, in inverted commas there, they do the day with no real reference to anything. Yeah,
but we hope as Christians that actually they'll take a few steps towards Christ in that, and we hope to take advantage of that. And I wonder whether there are nefarious forces who the same way want to take advantage of Halloween.
I'm not saying it's not the case, I'm just saying it's just easy to be... I think there's a lot of Christian scaremongering, isn't it?
Yes.
Yes. And overreaction and...
So how do we take the darkness seriously while also promoting the fact that the light is stronger and we have nothing to fear if we follow Christ and we walk in light? And to be the people of light means that we call out darkness, but we're not threatened by it or cowering from it. Because we've seen something stronger. Christopher Dempsey says, "Hello, better late than never." No, it's not, Christopher. Next time. Come on, 1 o'clock.
Be on time.
Although we are in fact a day early, aren't we?
Yeah,
Oh, okay. I let you off. He says his second comment is: if the speed of light is 186,000 miles per second, and it is, what is the speed of dark? I like that. See,
I can't see these comments.
Oh, really?
I thought I can see that first comment, but I can't see anything else. I don't know what's going on here.
Yeah.
Oh, there it is. No, it's there.
There it is. What's the speed of Paul Feasy? Significantly less than 186,000 miles per second.
Yep.
So the Halloween video, we would love you to use the Halloween video. Just share it online. We're going to share it out from our page
later this afternoon. It'll be up on about 4 o'clock. Should come up.
So just hit that share button. Share. And if you want resources like Paul was talking about, maybe tracts and that sort of thing, we've actually got cards that you can give out to trick-or-treaters that take people to this video. And actually, Andy, do you want to show our festivals resource pack? If you go to speaklife.org.uk/festivals, and you'll see all sorts of resources, not only for Halloween, but also for Remembrance Day and for Christmas. And so there you go. You've got the Halloween trick-or-treat thing. So that's the kind of card that you can give away to your friend. You can print off a PDF and give those to people. There's also a little 3-minute talk I've got on there about Halloween that you might want to use in various situations. An all-age song called Jesus, Our Risen Son. And then Remembrance Day is coming up. Obviously, Sunday week, we've got... that video that we made to end all wars from a couple of years ago, and then I've got a kind of a talk that I gave on Remembrance Day 2014, so the beginning of World War I, and you can go there and figure out that talk if you want to rip off any of this stuff. And then Christmas coming up, 4 kinds of Christmas. We've got on there all kinds of graphics that you can use for your PowerPoint presentations, also for your invitations to church. If you want to theme, you could theme all of Advent around 4 kinds of Christmas. I know churches that have done that, and there are churches that have preached through, are you Scrooge, are you Shopper, are you Santa, Are You the Stable, which are the 4 kinds of Christmas. And so we've got a pack there that talks about single sermon outline or a 4-sermon series outline if you want that. And then we've got the other Christmas pack. In fact, we've got 2 more Christmas packs. We've got He Came Down. Again, we've got the He Came Down nativity play. If you want to do a special needs nativity play in rhyming couplets, there it is. Take it, use it, it's yours. And then down we've got Meet the Nativity from last year. That was our 4-part time-traveling Christmas rom-com. And what?
That was a great blow. Time-traveling
Christmas rom-com. I think we are the only... So I'm going to say we are the best Christmas time-traveling rom-com.
It's out there.
In the history of time-traveling rom-coms. And if you want to show them in your church or local cinema, there are the high-definition files. See, Andy is just... our lovely assistant, Andy.
Modelling them here.
Modelling them here. And again, if you want to preach around Meet the Nativity, we've got a resource pack there that takes you through either a single sermon that takes you through Meet the Nativity, or 4 sermons that take you through the 4 characters of Meet the Nativity. And there's Advent for you. So we've got years worth of Christmas resources. We've got Halloween stuff, remembrance stuff, and it's all for free. And we'd love you to take it and use it. Why don't you share it on social media? Because I know that there will be lots of Christian pastors who are at their wits' end. What do we do for Christmas?
Yeah.
Well, here we go. You can use some of these resources, and they are utterly free for you to use. This is what we love to do at Speak Life. So please share the wealth.
Yep, lots of good stuff there.
On the subject of free... not everything's free, is it?
Sharing the wealth.
We've just started a Patreon account because, I mean, Speak Life is supported by donations. It's entirely supported by donations, and we tend to be supported by people who are less aware even of our online content. So you guys, obviously, if you're watching us or listening to us on the podcast, you guys are pretty internet literate, but we are supported by a demographic of people who have been supporting our charity for decades. And my line about this is always that we are supported by the people who don't really use us, and we're used by the people who don't really support us. And so Patreon is a way of getting support from you guys. Because we can't carry on with the old model, and we do need that those who are most benefiting from our resources actually most donate to them. So we'd love you to get on board with Patreon. We've just opened up that page, and there it is. It's patreon.com/SpeakLifeUK, and there it is. Speak Life is creating award-winning media to reach the world. Can you become a patron?
You could be the first person.
Wow.
You could be the first person, couldn't you, to donate?
Wow. Tell you what, if you're the first person, we'll send you a free book. How about that?
Signed photograph of Glen and Paul.
Yeah. Keep reaching for those stars. Love Glen. So, yeah, how about that? The first onto Patreon, and we'll send you a free book. How about that?
Yeah, and hopefully we've got plans, haven't we, for the future?
Got big plans.
Yeah. With a bit of
some
of our money behind us. Hopefully we
have
exciting things ahead.
So yeah, what we really want to do here at Speak Live is to be a foundry that forges evangelists and evangelistic resources for the church. And I think we're in a unique position to actually provide creative evangelists with experience and with training that will set them up for life. I think there are a lot of great training institutions if you want to be a preacher or a youth pastor. There are much fewer opportunities if you want to be an evangelist, and there's very little if you want to work in the creative media in terms of evangelistically. So we'd love to have some interns starting this September who will come along. They'll train with us. You can get a graduate diploma through Union with us, a university accredited academic theological degree over 2 years. But then, alongside studying with us, will you come on mission with us? Will you produce resources with us? We'd love to do this together as a team, so it's not just Paul and me and Andy. There's a real impetus. There's a real foundry.
Yeah, and I think there's lots of opportunities there. I mean, when I was at the Mind, Body and Soul thing the other day,
right.
When it was that Lucy actually, she
yeah,
said, "Oh, good to see you again. Thanks for all your videos. Pioneering work." And I was like, Is it really? And she was just like, yeah, no one else is doing this.
No.
And I thought about it, and I was like, well, actually, who else is really doing stuff online?
Right.
And then when we were at the BAFTAs, some of the guys there were saying like, oh, you guys put out so much stuff, like, you know. And they were like, how many people are there?
Do we?
You know, but actually, the reality is we do put out a lot, given that there's basically only about 3 of us really here most of the time. You know? And I'm just struck by if we can get stuff rolling,
right?
And we get more people in, I just think there's so much more potential of what could be done. And a breadth of materials that could go out there. Because at the moment, you know, we do put out like it might be a video a week on a Thorny or something, or you know, we parked that for a little while, but we'll come back. But that's just one. You know, it's really we've only really got the time to do one, haven't we, at the moment when we're together.
Bit of good content every week.
Yeah, but then of course, if others are on board, there's just there's so much more potential for stuff, and
Just imagine having an intern, and like one of them's a great videographer, and one of them's graphic designer, one's an illustrator, one's great with web, and what's possible. People who are good in front of the camera as well, you know, what's possible as we go on mission together, and we record that as we do live broadcasts, not just from here in our studio, but, you know, A, we can refurbish the studio and make it proper, and B, let's take this show on the road and let's go around student unions and let's do a live cast at Southampton University, you know, student union, and you know, and broadcast it around the place. And the sky is the limit, people, and there are 2.3 billion users of Facebook every month. There are 1.8 billion YouTube users every month. These are the largest countries on planet Earth, and we want to be missionaries to those countries, as it were. So, can you support us? Andy, do we have anyone supporting us yet? Do we? Where's our thermometer?
What are we on now? What are we on? Like,
anyway,
this is like one of those telephones. You know,
I know.
You get people to ring in. You know,
enough of that. But literally, in years of doing the podcast, we never ask for money. This is so. Apologies for breaking the mold, but we'd love you to partner with us in some of this work. So we thought about Halloween, but All Hallows Eve, October the 31st. That's not really Halloween, is it? What day is it, Paul?
All Hallows.
All Hallows Eve. Yes. What else? What else do we celebrate on October the 31st? Let me give you a clue.
Hang on. Reformation Day. Just for a second there, I was going, where are you going?
Where are you going with this?
Are we not talking about All Hallows Day?
Reformation Day. So Martin Luther pinned up the I was going to say 39 articles, not 39 articles, the 95 Theses. The 95 Theses on All Hallows Eve, because it was a massive festival and lots of people would be going through that church door, so they'd see it. But so we kind of date the Reformation from then. And so it'll be the 501st anniversary of that time when Pinterest really mattered. Boom. And this time last year, we put out a series of 5 videos. What can you take us through what these 5 videos were, Paul?
So they were on the 5 kind of solas. So the Latin is Latin, isn't it, for alone?
Isn't it hilarious that the Reformation is all about like taking the Bible out of Latin and putting it into the language of the masses? And the way we celebrate it is by speaking in Latin.
Yeah, absolutely. Anyway. So we did these 5 videos on these 5 solas. So we had Christ alone, grace alone, faith alone, Scripture alone, and God's glory alone. Yeah, that's it, isn't it? So we did a series of 5 videos released over 5 weeks. But actually, we're gonna get a clip in a moment. But you're also going to see them over the next 2.5 days. I think from this evening they'll be going out again. So if you've not seen them, you can check them out. Hopefully you'll find them useful. And I quote, someone said to me about the faith one. They said they thought it was the best explanation of justification and works.
Wow,
the relationship between justification, faith, and works they'd ever seen. Yeah,
it is. It is a really good video. It was your stuff. It was like faith plus.
That's obviously why it's so
works
good.
Equals salvation. No, it was really good. Check it out. So yes, not only educational, it's also entertaining. we like to call it edutainment.
It's got everything. It's got Nickelback references. It's got, what more could you need?
And it's got Grace Aid.
Yeah.
Should we have a look? Should we have a look at this from the Grace episode?
Today's episode is brought to you by Grace Aid, the drink of choice for the medieval church. Hey you! Are you feeling spiritually sluggish? Trouble doing enough good works? Then you need new Grace Aid. Grace Aid's special formula is packed with all the spiritual enrichment you need to begin your journey towards justification in the eyes of the Lord. Don't believe us? Just ask our satisfied customer.
Before I found Grace Aid, I had no hope of being saved. But at least now I'm in with a fighting chance.
Now that's endorsement. Long-term users of Grace Aid have reported such spiritual benefits as 30% higher chance of salvation, a crippling awareness of their own failings, and unnatural amounts of gas. So get Grace Aid today. The only way to guarantee your salvation. May not actually guarantee salvation. Always consult a priest before using Grace Aid. Grace Aid is not a substitute for willpower. Past godliness is no guarantee of future blessing. Sanctification levels may go up or down. If swallowed, consult medical help immediately.
Wait, what are you doing?
Just doing a video, the Grace one.
The Grace one?
Yeah.
That's got nothing to do with grace.
Well, alright then. What is Grace then?
Well, it's not a thing, that's for sure.
Oh, not a thing. Whatever.
Grace is not a thing. That's the Powerade view of grace, or what I like to call the cheese sandwich view of grace. Do you remember last time we thought about David and Goliath? David turns up to the front lines with some cheese sandwiches for his brothers, and he gives them the bread and the cheese. And sometimes people think that God's grace is like that. God gives you stuff that helps you to win your battles. But that is not grace in the biblical sense. It's certainly not grace in the Reformers' sense. When the Reformers spoke about being saved by grace alone, it's not a cheese sandwich that helps you win the day. You need your king, you need your champion, Christ, to come and win the battle for you. That's what grace is. Grace is not a thing.
And grace is not infused. That's another mistake people make about grace. The medieval church held the view that grace was something infused into us, like the Grace Aid or the cheese sandwich. Something that gives us the get up and go to change our behaviour and make us more just. But rather than grace being a thing that enables us to help ourselves, grace is the gift of Christ himself, and it's he who saves us. Think of Ephesians chapter 2, verse 5, where we're told that God made us alive when we were dead. It's not that we were dead and were given something to start making ourselves alive. No, we're told that God made us alive. Being made alive comes from outside of us, and it's something done to us. Can you imagine Jesus at the tomb of Lazarus, trying to get Lazarus to save himself?
Lazarus, come on! Come on, Lazarus. Lazarus, you're making me look bad. Fine, you're on your own. Here's...
You know, man,
we had to go.
Yeah. That feels like such a long time ago now.
Yeah.
It feels longer than the year it was. So.
A year, man. So
we were so new to it then.
I know. Now we're pros,
yeah.
Obviously. So yeah, that's one of the videos, and what I loved about doing, especially the grace and the faith, is making sure that we see that Jesus himself is the gift of God, who is offered freely, which is what grace is, and Jesus himself is what we receive in faith.
Yeah,
because so often we just think of grace is a thing that we get from God. And then faith is the thing that we drum up as though, like, how do I pay for this thing called grace? Let me try and find this thing called faith within me.
Yep.
And it's like, no, it's just all about Jesus. It's like God freely gives me Jesus. That's grace. I receive Jesus. That's faith. You know, but it's not about a thing. It's about Jesus.
Yeah. Yeah. I think there's lots of good stuff in, without blowing our own trumpet. There's lots of good stuff in those videos, which I think is really helpful. Things to be reminded of. That have come from the Reformation, so it's not things we've particularly, it's not stuff we've come up with, but stuff that actually, as in your everyday kind of Christian walk, it can be really encouraging and helpful. I think for some non-Christians, there's useful things in there.
Yeah. I really hope so.
Not just for the Christian.
Yeah, and so like the controlling metaphor for the whole thing is David and Goliath. That actually with David and Goliath, what you have is the Christ alone. David is Christ with a little c because he's just been anointed in 1 Samuel 16. In 1 Samuel 17, what he does as Christ is he alone wins the victory. So it's Christ alone wins the victory. And, he does it purely because of what he's like, not because of what his brothers are like. His brothers are cowards and fools, and Saul is a coward and a fool. But purely because of what he's like, as a gift, he wins their battle for them. That's what grace is. And then faith is not anything that the brothers contribute. Faith is just looking to their champion and going, he's done it. Well, hey, faith is looking. So anyway, that's the All You Need series. Check them out on Facebook and do share them with your friends. A couple of other things that I've been doing this week. I've done a couple of YouTube chats with guys who've gotten in touch. Both of them have happened to be atheists, and they've wanted to talk to me about morality and the reason why I believe in God. And we thought we'd just have a look at a couple of clips of these chats that we've had. And actually, these chats, they went on for like an hour and a half in each case. And so in the first instance, we'll have a look at a couple of things, I believe. A couple of things that I say to Tom Jump and a couple of things he says back when he asks me about why it is that I believe in God. And I basically, in the course of the hour and a bit, I give him two reasons that we get our teeth into. The first reason I say I believe in God is that, well, for a start, let's not assume that materialism is the obvious default option. Well, let's not assume that, well, obviously we all know that the world is just matter in motion, and then Christians have to come in and they have to prove that there's anything in addition to matter in motion. I just think that's a really silly way of setting up the debate, as though what is obvious is naturalistic science and that the world is a grand machine that grinds along. And then you've got to kind of prove that there are any extra items in the universe. I just think that's silly. I think what's most obvious about the world is that I am a conscious mind who's using rationality and language and emotion and rhetoric to communicate with you and other rational minds according to language, and what's closest to us in our experience is not even the material universe. What's closest to us are things like metaphysics and minds and morals and music and mercy and all these kinds of immaterial M's.
Yep.
That means that materialism is the least plausible account of our reality, and I happen to think the triune God is the most. So that's the bulk of the first conversation that I had with Tom, and let's have a clip from that.
From my perspective, if morality really was from a personal source, it would seem like that personal source would have created the most moral world possible, and there wouldn't be all of this suffering. So it seems more likely to me that it was just like a super law like gravity that tends to make us inclined towards one certain outcome, but it didn't actually give us that, because if it did, why wouldn't it have just made the most perfect world from the start?
Yeah, and I guess Spinoza's comeback was, I guess this must be the best of all possible worlds, which is that's not the direction that I take things in, but I tend to think our experience of this world in all its ugliness and pain and horror is exactly an experience of fallenness, that every evil we experience is a privation of the good, and therefore it seems to speak of the kind of story that the Bible has, that we began with goodness and we have fallen into this hell of a pit. That's not obviously the end of the story. If God, this most loving being, is to continue to love his creation, then he's going to want to enter into the pit to redeem us and bring us to the best of all possible worlds. But I don't think we have any reason for thinking that there can't be a good reason for God to allow a fall if indeed his intention is to redeem and bring us to the happily ever after. So that's some of the shape of my response to the question of evil and theodicy and that sort of thing. I don't know what your reaction to that is.
So from my perspective, I think that if there was an all-good, all-powerful God, he would have created a world where each individual gets to decide for themselves both the positives and the negatives of the world in which they live. And in a world like that, any benefit or any reason God may have for making a fallen world would just be optional. So we wouldn't force us against our will into this world. He would give us the option, and that would seem to be a more morally superior way the world could have been.
Yeah, I mean, it's always difficult by the nature of the case to say what God could have and should have done in these sorts of situations. But I do find it interesting that I think we have millions of experiments where people try to tell stories that are meaningful, stories that sort of resonate with the human heart. And in none of these stories does it go, once upon a time there was a kingdom of light and life and love and everyone was happy, the end. you know, I've got a 3-year-old daughter, and I tell that story to her, and she says, that's not how stories go. And she's right. Stories, you know, there's a kingdom of light and life and love, and then the dragon comes and steals the princess. And then, you know, the knight has got to go and save her and, you know, go through sacrifice and a fight to the death and snatch victory from the jaws of defeat. And then there's a happily ever after. And I just think we do have experience of trying to speak worlds into existence. It's called storytelling, novel writing, plays, cinema. And in all these stories that we tell, we do tend to have a happy beginning, a fall, a hero, fight to the death, and a happily ever after. And you know, that's not a watertight philosophical argument, but it is pointing to the fact that when we do run the experiments, when we do try ourselves to speak worlds, that's the kind of shape those worlds take.
I agree. I think that suffering should definitely be an option, but I think it should be voluntary suffering. If you had the option to choose how much suffering you were going to experience or what kind of world you wanted to live in, you could choose to live in a world exactly like ours as designed by God with all the positives and the negatives. The only difference would be is those people who don't want to live in what they see as a very immoral, painful world, they would have the option to choose to live in one that they would prefer. And that seems like a much more moral outcome. And it seems like no matter what the reason God could have to have any other world, because that would always be an option in this world, because you can choose whatever world you want, then there can't ever be a reason he couldn't provide this world, because any benefit is going to be an option.
Yeah, I mean, I'll have to think about that, but I mean, one thing that occurs to me is that a character in a play who chooses not to be part of that play, but to, in some sense, be the author, is not really being a character in a play. If there is going to be an author to the play, and if we are not that author, I don't know, it seems to me that the author making the character into the one who does a kind of a choose your own adventure, that is to have not an author-character relationship, you know?
But wouldn't the author be immoral if they forced the character to go through a lot of suffering they didn't want? Like, wouldn't it be immoral for me to write a character who was a personal being who could experience morality and just have them just experience immense suffering that they never volunteered for against their will? Wouldn't that be horribly immoral?
Well, that would make every story writer immoral. I don't think so. I don't think Shakespeare was immoral for writing Hamlet. You know, poor Hamlet. But you know, the Christian version of that story would be that Shakespeare writes himself into that play in order to take the tragedy onto himself and to turn it into a comedy and to turn it into a happily ever after. And I think when you're telling that sort of story, I don't think the morality of Shakespeare is in question at that point.
I would disagree, because I would think that if Shakespeare had the power to actually create living beings who could experience morality and suffering, and he deliberately placed them into a story like that, I think that would be incredibly immoral. I think it's not immoral because it's just a story and there's no one actually being hurt by it. But if you could actually write a story that could hurt people, I think that would be immoral to do so. No different than like a gun or shooting someone.
No, I don't. Well, yeah, I disagree. I think if we are talking about the author of life himself, then we are talking about someone with whom we have an asymmetric relationship. We do not exist on the same level of being as the author. We are characters in the story being told. And I guess if we want to assess the character of the author, we have to take into account the shape of the story, and we have to take into account, I think, on Christianity, we have to take into account that he enters into the tragedy to turn it into the comedy and offers all characters the happily ever after.
So if you want to know more about that conversation, there is a long conversation. It's on our Facebook page. We've linked to the YouTube video there that you can watch. We also get into a second reason why I believe in Christianity, and the second reason is Jesus.
Always a good one.
Yeah.
Always a good reason.
Probably should have led with that one.
I was going to say, it's a good one to lead with, really.
Yeah.
Number one. Jesus.
Yeah, I didn't do a lot of thinking in advance of the video. I just sort of sat down and he's like, "So why do you believe?" I'm like, "Oh, okay," and away we go. But yeah. So yeah, my second reason why I'm a Christian, which should have been my first, is well, here is this guy who comes into the middle of human history, and he's the kind of character who writes him. He is Shakespeare written into Hamlet, in order to take Hamlet's tragedy on himself and give him the comedy. And I think, if there is going to be meaning to this world, then Jesus is exactly the sort of person you need in this reality, to make sense of this reality. He's the one who comes from beyond, and yet he's here to rescue us. And so in Jesus, you've got this interesting overlap between someone who definitely claims to be from beyond, and he definitely belongs to this historical moment. And so, really, he's kind of the only candidate for mediator that you could possibly imagine. There are a number of people who've claimed to be the Son of God, but we don't tend to take them seriously. We tend to section them. Yep. There are a number of people who wield power in the world and have great followings, but they don't say that they are God, because they would lose those followings. And somehow Jesus, the most famous man who ever lived, also claims to be God. I think we should sit up and take notice of him. So, yeah.
Absolutely.
And you can see what Tom said back to that. Just go to our Facebook page and you'll find that conversation there.
Yeah, check out the whole conversation.
Brilliant. And then a second conversation I had was with Adam from Think Club, and really enjoyed this because we're both fans of Jordan Peterson. He and I.
Ding.
Yeah,
ring the bell. It's a Peterson bell. He's got another mention.
We do mention Jesus more.
Number one reason I'm a Christian. Jordan Peterson. Jesus.
Well, it just is interesting that how many people who I say, "Why are you in church now?" and they say Jordan Peterson. So that is interesting. But so we've got a shared appreciation for Jordan Peterson. Also a shared appreciation for a guy called Jonathan Haidt, who we've mentioned before. We mentioned him on a Thorny Question recently, or in fact a video about Hemant Mehta. Jonathan Haidt is also an atheist, same as Jordan Peterson. Who knows who Jordan Peterson believes? He doesn't know what he believes. But Jonathan Haidt is a very secular person who, as well as he's a moral psychologist, and he wrote a book called The Righteous Mind that talks about how it is that we make our assessments of the world. And like all the Christians I know love this book. Every sort of Christian leader said to me for years, "You need to read The Righteous Mind," before I finally read The Righteous Mind, and then I could see what they were talking about. So we start off having a conversation about Jonathan Haidt and The Righteous Mind, and then we get into the issue of morality and whether the Darwinian framework can give us a proper grounding for morality. So let's have a look at this conversation with Adam from Think Club.
And I mentioned sort of Jonathan Haidt in that regard. That there does seem to be, with a certain brand of new atheist, a kind of this enlightenment understanding that we are these rational individuals who kind of read the data completely neutrally. We just, scan things like a barcode scanner and just blip, 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 and in goes the data and we process it. Which I think
you don't buy that, do you?
No.
Okay.
No, and Christianity has never ought not to buy that.
Right. Christianity as a philosophy seems great to me, because you're talking about how man is, is imperfect, and the idea behind Christ is that he is perfect and that we're striving to perfect ourselves, but we always fall short. So as a philosophy, I think Christianity is great.
Yeah. And I think there's so much overlap between Jonathan Haidt and what Christians have always been saying. And, every Christian I know, sort of in Christian leadership, says you've got to read The Righteous Mind. You've got to understand.
Oh, really? Interesting.
Oh, yeah. He's kind of a superstar among Christians, of a certain sort of Augustinian bent. I don't know if that kind of.
Yeah, I actually just met Jonathan Haidt last week. Yeah. He is kind of a superstar. He definitely is.
Yeah, and so he kind of frames things Hume's way, but I think Hume himself was drawing on a lot of Christian tradition. He was obviously rejecting a lot of Christian tradition as well, but that the whole idea that moral intuitions come first and then rationalizations come later. I mean, that's just Christianity 101. We are self-justifying fools. We are, as Augustine said, curved in on ourselves. Or Martin Luther in the Reformation, he said that we have a real bondage of the will, which is not that you can't do what you want to do. It's that you can only do what you want to do, and you can't really shift what you want to do. Your heart is like the elephant in Jonathan Haidt's analogy, and your brain just yabbers along like the rider. And Luther was saying that back in the Reformation. So another guy, Archbishop Cranmer, who wrote the Book of Common Prayer. I'm an Anglican minister, so I use the Book of Common Prayer on a weekly basis. But he sort of summarized our anthropology, or rather someone summarized his anthropology as what the heart loves, the will chooses, and the mind justifies.
Interesting.
And there's a great sort of dialogue online with Jonathan Haidt speaking to some Christians in New York. There's a ministry called Mockingbird, and they bring him that sort of phrase from Cranmer's anthropology, and and they're just like two hearts beating together. I find it a profoundly Christian anthropology to say that we are not these rational individuals who calmly and neutrally assess the data and formulate our ideas. We are tribal, we are self-justifying, we employ motivated reasoning, confirmation bias, all that kind of stuff, I think, is there from page 1 of the Bible, really.
So Peterson and Haidt both have a very materialist view of morality. I mean, if you look at Jonathan Haidt's moral foundations theory, he's proposing a very mechanistic view of morality. And one of the things that I think the anti-theists get wrong at their own peril is there are answers to these questions from a very materialist perspective that they're just unwilling to accept. And I think, ironically, one of the reasons they're unwilling to accept it is that moral foundations theory really puts a lot of evidence behind the fact that Christianity is a time-tested evolutionary model for philosophy that's really adaptive, and their whole goal is to dispel Christianity with the idea that somehow this is going to make the world a more rational place, which I just think is kind of a fool's errand. So I think their moral blindness towards moral foundations theory, or Peterson talks about it in terms of personalities, I think really does them a disservice. But I'm curious what your take is on that materialist mechanistic view.
As I look around the world, there are things that I don't think fit easily into a purely materialistic frame. And I think morals is one of them. I think the fact that we have minds is another. The fact that we have aesthetics and music and beauty is another. The fact that we have logic and rationality is another. I just think that the kind of metaphysical furniture that there is in the universe is not best represented as basically material with these emergent properties coming out of just matter in motion. I think this very textured universe that we live in is best accounted for by saying that there is a kind of reality called moral truth, and there's a kind of reality called materialistic science, and there's a kind of reality out there called aesthetics and beauty, and
I understand what you're saying about how grounding your morality in a supernatural being is helpful, and I completely agree. And I think from a mechanistic point of view, the evidence bears that out. But I guess the question that I really have is why. I mean, I'm not a moral relativist. I'm not going to say that the burning the widow is okay. It's not okay. But there's rational reasons why it's not okay. And there's rational reasons why Christianity surpassed that, because we got rid of that practice. It made our morality more evolutionarily successful. Evolution is very much driven by reason, calculating reason, right?
I do wonder whether evolution might undermine reason, though, in terms of if my mind has evolved purely in order to survive, then it is not evolved so much to respond to truth as to win, as you know. And so
that's correct. Yes, truth is not important as far as survival and reproduction goes.
Yeah. So why does that not make you very suspicious of your mind and very suspicious of what you would call rationality if your mind has purely been evolved in order to win rather than in order to find the truth?
Well, the separation that I would make would be between perception, my personal perception, and actually what is going on in the physical world. In the physical world, I think mathematically we can calculate exactly what's happening with evolution. But my perception is obviously going to be tainted.
So we had a free-ranging conversation across a whole bunch of things for about an hour and 20 minutes. So once again, you can go to Facebook and see the link to that YouTube video. But I think where we got to on that issue of why trust your mind, I think that's what I've taken away from the conversation. Because it does seem to me, if my brain has been evolved purely to survive, it really hasn't been evolved to seek the truth. And I think that becomes a problem. You know, why do I trust my rationality? Why would I even trust my reasoning about evolution?
Well, yeah, because he seemed to agree with you. Yes, it's adapted for winning, not for truth. But then you said there's a distinction for him. At least my understanding of what you said there was that, you know, there are things which are empirical things like maths in the world that you can measure and stuff. And then there are the perceptions, which he's saying, we could be doubtful, perhaps, about. I think that's kind of what he was getting at. Yeah. But I suppose why would you think your mind could even weigh up the empirical stuff?
Right.
You know.
I think that's exactly right. I think it's a universal acid. I think if you think that all that's going on in life is the struggle for survival, I think that corrodes morality in a pretty devastating way. I think it also corrodes reason in a pretty devastating way, because I think it means that there isn't this pure sphere within my mind that is able to access the truth out there. Maybe there is a truth out there, but if my mind has not been evolved to access truth or to respond to truth, but actually only to win, then I really don't see why we trust our minds. And it's not that there could be a world out there and that's the real thing that I can hold on to. The only thing that I'm holding with is my mind, right? if the entirety of my mind is not a truth-seeking organ, but is in fact just a survival a survival-making organ, then this is Alvin Plantinga's big argument against naturalism, and I think it's devastating, but I'm sure Adam's got further comebacks on that, and I really enjoyed my conversation with Adam, and hope we get a chance to do it again. Yeah, we should do an away and a home leg. You know, I was away for that leg on his channel.
I actually thought my internet was broken when I was watching it because it was two people having a civil conversation about something on YouTube. Like, there was no smack talk. You know,
same with Tom.
Even the comments were the comment section is pretty pretty respectful. Like.
Yeah. So I think Adam's done a great job of, because you know, to one degree you're not responsible for your commenters and you're not responsible for your audience and what they do, but I think it does speak well of...
That's how I feel about a lot of our Speak Live audience.
That's right.
Can't be held responsible for...
Chris Dempsey and his tardiness for a start. But really enjoyed my chat with Adam. And I really like conversations where... Like, you could have conversations with two people who disagree about an issue. And you do get the two sides of things, and that can be helpful. But I really like conversations where you get two people who you would not expect to agree. You know, there was that really refreshing Unbelievable episode where Tom Holland and Tom Wright were on together. Yeah. And so Tom Holland, just like a cultural Christian, but he's not a believer, doesn't go to church.
Yeah.
And, you know, former Bishop of Durham, Tom Wright. And yet they were just like two hearts beating together on the issue of the historical Christ, on the issue of the impact of Christianity on the West. And it was just such a wonderful conversation. So I think we need to see more conversations where people just are in, not two people who you'd expect to agreeing, because that's just an echo chamber. But two people who you wouldn't expect to agree finding common ground. I think that's quite a good way forward. And maybe I shouldn't give away all my thoughts, but I would love to see a show where you kind of put people in each other's shoes and you ask them, can you literally give the other person's argument, like what Jordan Peterson and Sam Harris did, the steel man the other person's. I'd love to see more and more of that.
It was really good. I enjoyed watching it, and I thought there were some interesting bits in there, like his view of the kind of anti-theists, and how he quite wanted to distance himself from them. Right. And I thought it was interesting. He said, how he said Christianity is a time-tested moral philosophy, but actually the new atheists can't engage with that because all they want to do is tear it down. Right. So they can't even acknowledge any goodness. Right. So they won't even look at a materialistic. Right. Kind of
the evidence. They won't look at the evidence.
They're not even prepared to give a materialistic reason for why this morality might have grown up, because they're too busy trying to tear down that. And then I think someone, I don't know, it wasn't on that video, it was on one of our other videos, someone had quoted something about Sam Harris, and said as an ideologue, he'd never understand the nuance of the Bible or Christianity. So in a sense, you can never get this discussion past a certain point.
Exactly. And I think therefore Jordan Peterson needs new conversation partners. That's what a lot of people are saying, and maybe Jonathan Haidt. Why don't we recommend Jonathan Haidt as a conversation partner for him? And he certainly has done dialogues with Haidt before. But I just think people should let's be more curious. Let's all be more curious. Why is it that the West has built this kind of civilization? I don't think you can say because of the climate or the terrain of Europe. I don't think that's a convincing argument. You definitely can't say because of the ethnicity of Europeans. For a start, East Asians are smarter than Europeans, in every kind of IQ test that's done. So it's got to be this story. It's got to be the Jesus story that has actually made the West. It's the Bible that's built our world. So be more curious about why on earth would it be this story that's kind of built the world, and why on earth would it be human beings who are the only ones who are sentient, who had this moral sense?
And maybe I misinterpreted what was being said, but I mean, it struck me that a lot of it came down to, he felt you both agreed here's this good system, but you think it's true, and he thinks it's just a kind of
he thinks it's
true in the sense that he thinks it's true in the sense that it's just it's evolved and it's the best thing out there. But I'm not sure whether you quite got round to the deeper question of, but is it actually true? It is. It is this Jesus. There's all very well talking about the Jesus story, and he was saying I can see how the Jesus story is a good motivational story. But maybe there is an opportunity to push deeper and say, did this happen? Was he that person? Did the things that are written about him actually happen? Did he do these things? Because then that changes the conversation a bit. But I don't know. Did you ever quite get into that? I had to watch it quite quickly. So
no. And so if we have another conversation, I'd love to get into that. He said he grew up Christian and sort of then moved away from it. But then by the end of the conversation, he said he hadn't really been to church. I don't know if he meant hadn't been to church since then, or whether he'd ever gone to church for any length of time. I don't know. So it'd be really, really interesting to look at that. But I think true, if you're a materialist, has to be in the scientific or in the logical realm. And I guess I would just want to say there are other kinds of truths. There might be historical truth that you need to assess in a different kind of way, and there might be moral truth that you need to assess in a different way, and there might be aesthetic truth that you need to assess in a different way. And so there are different ways of assessing truth. And I think you kind of tie your hands, you tie at least one hand behind your back when you sort of say, the only ingredients in my universe are matter in motion. That's the only thing. And therefore, that's what's true. And then everything else is just, in inverted commas, true. Everything else is just metaphorically true. And so we tended to have that kind of argument. And so for me, I was saying, look, when you reach for the language of metaphorical truth, I think what you're really wanting to do is to say that there's a moral realm that is just as real as the mathematical realm and the material realm, but it's different and it's assessed differently. Whereas he was just wanting to say, no, what's really real is the mathematical and the material, and we don't have a space for the moral realm. But yeah, Barry Cooper, who's been on the show before, he watched our discussion, and he said that, you know, the difference between you two, he said, Glenn, you say it's true, that's why it works. Whereas he says it works, that's why it's, in inverted commas, true. I think that's a really good summary of where we got to. But yeah. Have a watch, have a share, and see if it gets some conversations going on your social media platforms. That would be great.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, that will do us. It's 2:05. Golly gosh. So look out online for the Halloween video. Do share it among your friends. Do look out for the All You Need videos. And do look out for another piece of media coming out from the Brephos conference that we went to last week. Or was it 2 weeks ago? Anyway, a while ago. 2 weeks. 2 weeks ago. 2 weeks. An interview with Professor John Wyatt, Professor of Neonatal Pediatrics. And I loved that. That was my favourite video to do, really. So that's going to come out on...
That's Thursday evening. 7 o'clock.
Brilliant.
It'll be hitting Facebook.
Excellent. And then this will come out on Friday as a podcast.
Absolutely.
Fantastic. Is there anything more to cover? Any other business?
Any other business? I don't think so.
No.
I think we've mentioned quite a lot today. We've got through a lot of stuff, as always.
We've got through it all.
So.
Brilliant. And Christopher Dempsey, still struggling with Patreon. Keep going. Keep going, Christopher Dempsey.
So someone else will swoop in and get that book.
If you really want a book, just go and buy one. No. Keep going. Go to patreon.com/speaklifeuk and get it for yourself. All right, that'll do us for today. See you later.
Thanks, everyone. See you.
Bye-bye.